Today's briefing focuses on intelligence assessments, indicating that Iran has successfully constructed and is now operating uranium enrichment facilities deep underground in locations that remain largely invisible to United States satellite surveillance systems. According to multiple defense and intelligence sources, these installations have been built at depths and using concealment techniques that render American orbital reconnaissance capabilities significantly less effective than previously assumed. This development has reportedly triggered serious concern within the Trump administration, as it fundamentally undermines the confidence with which military planners and intelligence agencies can assess Iran's nuclear capabilities and operational readiness. The significance of this situation extends beyond the technical challenge of monitoring underground construction. It represents a strategic vulnerability in American intelligence gathering that directly impacts the credibility of military options and negotiation leverage. If Iran has successfully concealed critical components of its enrichment infrastructure from satellite observation, then any assessment of how quickly Iran could produce weapons-grade uranium becomes subject to substantial uncertainty. This uncertainty creates a dilemma for decision-makers who must evaluate whether diplomatic pressure or military action can achieve desired outcomes without complete knowledge of what exists beneath the surface. This briefing will examine several critical areas. First, the nature and location of Iran's underground enrichment facilities as currently understood by intelligence agencies. Second, the specific technical methods Iran has employed to defeat satellite surveillance. Third, the evidence suggesting that the Trump administration has been caught off guard by the scope of this construction. Fourth, the strategic implications for negotiations currently underway in Oman and for potential military action. And finally, what this development means for the broader contest between American technological superiority and Iranian asymmetric countermeasures. The most concerning development involves a site located approximately 2 kilometers south of the Natanz nuclear complex, in a location that Iranian officials have not officially acknowledged, but which intelligence analysts refer to as Pickaxe Mountain or Mount Kolang Gaz La. Satellite imagery analysis by commercial providers and government agencies has confirmed that Iran began excavation work at this site in 2023, and construction activity has accelerated significantly over the past several months. Images show growing piles of excavated dirt and the development of multiple tunnel entrances reinforced with security walls and protective barriers. However, what remains unknown is far more significant than what has been confirmed. Satellite imagery can reveal that digging is occurring. It can measure the volume of material being removed. It can track vehicle traffic and construction equipment, but it cannot penetrate hundreds of meters of solid rock to reveal what exists within the mountain itself. Intelligence agencies believe this facility may be intended as an underground centrifuge assembly hall or potentially a new enrichment site designed to replace capacity lost in the Israeli and American strikes of June 2025. But belief is not the same as confirmed knowledge. The head of Iran's nuclear program, Ali Akbar Salehi, stated publicly after sabotage damaged a centrifuge facility at Natanz in 2020 that Iran would build a more modern and larger assembly hall in the heart of the mountain near Natanz. This statement provides context for the Pickaxe Mountain construction, but it does not confirm the facility's current status, configuration, or operational capability. When Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian was asked about the site in September 2025, he responded that satellite imagery was insufficient to determine what was happening and called for International Atomic Energy Agency inspectors to verify the site's purpose. However, Iran has simultaneously banned those same inspectors from accessing the location, creating a situation where verification is demanded but prevented. Intelligence assessments suggest that Iran has learned from decades of satellite surveillance and has adapted its construction techniques accordingly. Rather than building large above-ground structures that can be easily identified and targeted, Iran is investing in deep underground facilities that provide both physical protection against airstrikes and operational security against reconnaissance. The Institute for Science and International Security has noted that Iran appears to be constructing facilities at greater depths than previous installations, potentially extending several hundred meters into mountainous terrain. At these depths, even advanced bunker-penetrating weapons would struggle to achieve destruction without extremely precise targeting intelligence that current satellite capabilities cannot provide. Iran's success in concealing underground facilities relies on a combination of physical engineering and operational security measures designed specifically to counter satellite reconnaissance. The most basic technique is depth. By building facilities hundreds of meters underground, Iran ensures that no optical or radar satellite can observe internal activities. Satellites can photograph tunnel entrances and track surface construction, but they cannot see through solid rock. This simple physical reality creates an intelligence gap that no amount of technological sophistication can overcome through orbital observation alone. Iran has also employed tactical measures to obscure even surface-level activity. At damaged nuclear facilities in Natanz and Isfahan, Iran has constructed white roofing structures over bombed buildings. These roofs serve a dual purpose. First, they physically block satellites from observing reconstruction or salvage work. Second, they create ambiguity about the status of these sites. Intelligence analysts cannot determine whether Iran is rebuilding destroyed equipment, salvaging materials, or simply protecting empty ruins. This uncertainty complicates military planning because commanders cannot assess with confidence whether a previously struck target has been reconstituted and therefore requires additional attention. At tunnel entrances near Isfahan, Iran has installed new barriers and in some cases has filled tunnels with dirt. These measures protect against missile strikes, but they also make it more difficult for satellites to determine whether tunnels are active, abandoned, or being repurposed. Vehicle traffic analysis, traditionally used to assess facility activity levels, becomes less useful when Iran can conduct most transportation and personnel movement within tunnel systems that are invisible from orbit. The construction of security walls around sensitive sites further limits what can be observed from above. Recent U.S. intelligence assessments, reported by CNN in late January, indicate that Iran is building nuclear facilities deeper underground than previous installations. This assessment suggests that American intelligence agencies have recognized the trend but have not developed effective countermeasures. The acknowledgement that facilities are being built deeper underground is itself an admission that current surveillance capabilities are inadequate for the task. If intelligence agencies could effectively monitor these deep facilities, there would be no need to express concern about their depth. The Trump administration's response to intelligence about Iran's underground facilities reveals significant concern that is manifested in both diplomatic and military actions. The decision to send Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner to meet Iranian representatives in Oman represents an attempt to achieve through negotiation what cannot be confirmed through surveillance. If the United States cannot reliably assess Iran's enrichment capacity through technical means, then direct engagement becomes necessary to establish transparency mechanisms or extract concessions that reduce the threat. However, the simultaneous deployment of the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier strike group to the Persian Gulf region signals that diplomacy is being backed by military pressure. On February 7th, Witkoff and Kushner visited the carrier to meet with sailors and to signal resolve to Iranian negotiators. This combination of diplomatic outreach and military posturing suggests an administration that is uncertain about the best path forward and is therefore pursuing multiple options simultaneously. The uncertainty appears to stem directly from the intelligence gap created by Iran's underground construction. President Trump's public statements have alternated between optimism about potential deals and threats about steep consequences if Iran does not comply with American demands. On February 6th, Trump stated that Iran looks like it wants to make a deal very badly, but also warned that failure to reach agreement would result in consequences that are very steep. This rhetorical pattern indicates an administration that recognizes the limitations of its leverage while attempting to project confidence. The fact that Trump felt compelled to threaten consequences suggests that he is not confident those consequences can be effectively delivered, particularly if critical Iranian infrastructure remains hidden and therefore untargetable. Congressional reactions have also reflected concern. Representative Pat Fallon stated on February 9th that Iran can never be allowed to acquire a nuclear weapon and that under President Trump, all options are on the table. However, the emphasis on keeping options open rather than announcing specific actions suggests that those options are constrained by the intelligence limitations discussed in this briefing. If the United States had complete confidence in its ability to locate and destroy Iran's enrichment capacity, the rhetoric would likely be more definitive and less conditional. The existence of underground enrichment facilities that cannot be adequately monitored from space creates profound challenges for military planning. Traditional targeting doctrine relies on comprehensive intelligence about enemy capabilities and locations. Pilots and weapon systems officers need precise coordinates. Damage assessment requires before and after imagery to confirm that targets have been destroyed. However, if substantial portions of Iran's enrichment infrastructure exist in facilities that cannot be fully mapped or assessed, then targeting becomes speculative rather than precise. This uncertainty affects the calculus of preemptive strikes. If the United States were to launch a military campaign aimed at eliminating Iran's nuclear capabilities, commanders would need confidence that they could destroy enough of the program to prevent Iran from quickly reconstituting its capacity. However, if unknown facilities exist in unmapped underground locations, that confidence cannot be justified. Even a comprehensive strike campaign that successfully destroyed all known targets would leave decision-makers uncertain about what survived and what remains operational in facilities that were never targeted because they were never detected. The intelligence gap also affects deterrence credibility. Deterrence relies on the belief that one side has the capability to inflict unacceptable damage on the other. For the United States, the implicit deterrent threat is that American military power could eliminate Iran's nuclear program if Iran crosses certain red lines. However, if Iran knows that the United States cannot locate all of its facilities, then that deterrent threat loses credibility. Iran can reasonably calculate that even after a major American strike, it would retain sufficient capacity to continue its program, because some facilities would survive simply by virtue of never having been found. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi stated on February 7th that enrichment is Iran's inalienable right and must continue, and that even with bombing, they could not destroy our capabilities. This statement reflects confidence that Iran's infrastructure is sufficiently dispersed and protected to survive military action. The reference to bombing suggests that Iranian leaders have internalized the lessons of the June 2025 strikes, which damaged above-ground facilities but apparently left underground capacity largely intact. The fact that Iran can make this claim publicly indicates that Iranian officials believe American intelligence agencies are aware of their limitations, and therefore the statement cannot be definitively contradicted. The intelligence limitations discussed in this briefing directly affect the dynamics of negotiations currently underway between Iranian and American representatives in Oman. The United States has reportedly demanded that Iran halt uranium enrichment, transfer its existing stockpile of highly enriched material out of the country, and accept inspections to verify compliance. However, Iran has rejected these demands as violations of its sovereignty and has insisted that enrichment will continue regardless of external pressure. Iran's negotiating position appears strengthened by the knowledge that the United States cannot verify Iranian compliance through unilateral technical means. If Iran agrees to halt enrichment at declared facilities, how would the United States confirm that enrichment is not continuing at undeclared underground sites? The IAEA has been denied access to suspected facilities since the June 2025 conflict, and Iran has made clear that inspections will not be permitted until political conditions are met. This creates a verification gap that makes any agreement difficult to enforce. The fact that negotiations are occurring in Oman rather than in a multilateral format also reflects the limitations of American leverage. The United States initially proposed talks in Istanbul that would have included regional partners and addressed issues beyond the nuclear program, including Iran's missile development and support for proxy forces. However, Iran insisted on bilateral talks focused solely on nuclear issues, and the United States accepted this format. The acceptance suggests that American negotiators recognize they have limited alternatives if they want any dialogue at all. Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi described the Oman talks as a good start, but emphasized that building trust would take time and that Iran's position on enrichment remains firm. The emphasis on trust is significant because it shifts the burden onto the United States to demonstrate that it will uphold any agreement. Given that the previous Trump administration withdrew from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in 2018, and that the United States participated in strikes against Iranian facilities in June 2025, Iran has legitimate grounds to question American commitment to diplomatic solutions. This history, combined with American intelligence limitations, creates a negotiating environment where Iran holds stronger cards than the surface power balance might suggest. The situation described in this briefing reflects a broader strategic competition between American technological superiority and Iranian asymmetric countermeasures. The United States has invested billions of dollars in satellite reconnaissance capabilities, synthetic aperture radar, signals intelligence, and advanced imagery analysis. These systems provide unmatched capability for monitoring above-ground activities anywhere on the planet. However, they have an inherent limitation. They cannot see through solid rock. Iran recognized this limitation and adapted its strategy accordingly. Rather than attempting to match American technological capabilities, Iran invested in tunneling, underground construction, and operational security measures designed to exploit the blind spots in American surveillance architecture. This approach requires less financial investment than developing competitive satellite or air power, but it achieves strategic effect by negating the advantages that American technology provides. The result is a situation where the technologically superior power finds itself unable to achieve the level of intelligence confidence necessary for effective military or diplomatic action. This dynamic is not unique to the Iran case. Russia, China, and North Korea have all invested heavily in underground military infrastructure precisely because it reduces vulnerability to the precision strike capabilities that define American military power. However, Iran's combination of mountainous terrain, advanced engineering capability, and strategic focus on nuclear deterrence has produced a particularly challenging environment for American intelligence collection. The lessons that Iran has learned from decades of confrontation with the United States and Israel have been applied systematically to create a program that is increasingly difficult to monitor and even more difficult to eliminate through military means. The intelligence indicating that Iran has constructed underground enrichment facilities that American satellites cannot adequately monitor represents more than a technical challenge for reconnaissance systems. It exposes a fundamental vulnerability in the assumptions that underpin American strategy toward Iran. For years, American officials have operated on the premise that they could monitor Iranian nuclear activities with sufficient fidelity to provide timely warning of breakout attempts and to enable effective military action if necessary. The reality of deep underground facilities that remain invisible to orbital surveillance undermines both of those assumptions. The Trump administration's response, combining diplomatic engagement in Oman with military posturing through carrier deployments, reflects an understanding that neither approach alone is sufficient. Diplomacy without verification is unreliable. Military action without complete targeting intelligence is risky. The combination attempts to manage a situation where American options are more constrained than public rhetoric suggests. The emphasis on keeping all options on the table is itself evidence that those options are limited by intelligence gaps that cannot be quickly closed. Looking forward, this dynamic is likely to persist and potentially worsen. Iran has demonstrated both the capability and the determination to build facilities that defeat satellite surveillance. As long as mountainous terrain and tunneling technology exist, Iran will retain the ability to conceal portions of its nuclear infrastructure. American intelligence agencies will continue to work on developing alternative collection methods, including human intelligence sources, signals intercepts, and seismic monitoring of underground construction. However, none of these methods can provide the comprehensive real-time situational awareness that satellite imagery offers for above-ground facilities. The broader implication is that confidence in the ability to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons through either surveillance or military action must be reduced accordingly. Uncertainty is now a permanent feature of the strategic landscape, and that uncertainty favors the side that can operate in the shadows. Iran has successfully moved critical components of its program into those shadows, and American panic about this development is justified by the recognition that technological superiority alone cannot solve the problem.